As you know, the Community Mural Project is offered by Mid-America Arts Alliance in partnership with the Nebraska Arts Council. Mid-America is your regional support for arts and culture initiatives, and our programs range from traveling exhibitions to performing arts grants and professional development. And we do this in partnership with the NEA and 5 state arts agencies, including the Nebraska Arts Council. The Community Mural Project is the first phase of a larger collaborative art program that Mid-America is currently working to develop. We've seen the incredible power that community art has to transform and unite people through the process of art making, and the project that we're talking about today is designed to focus that energy around the process of creating a mural. For this project, we're looking for a community that shows need along with a strong desire and potential for growth through this process. An applicant should also exhibit strong potential for diverse community participation. We'll want a group that's reflective of your overall community. You also need to have a project manager who possesses a commitment and capacity to lead, organize, and communicate. And lastly, and this is probably a little obvious, applicant organizations should have a mission that addresses current public needs and is an organization in good standing with federal and state requirements. But the critical piece to any community art program is having the right leader, someone who truly understands the process and importance of community development. And with this project, that leader is artist Dave Loewenstein. Dave is an internationally known muralist, writer, and printmaker based in Lawrence, Kansas. He's been recognized widely for his work and is the co-author of Kansas Murals, A Traveler's Guide, and is the co-director of a documentary film, Creating Counterparts.
This is a presentation I'm going to go through pretty quickly just to give you an initial sort of idea of what these projects are about and how they fit into the context of public art and sort of what we think about community-based art. So I'll just go through this, and afterwards we can talk and ask questions. I like to start with this slide because it's usually how we're introduced to the idea of visual art. It's at a museum where somebody, a teacher or a museum person, tells us very clearly why a painting or a sculpture is important. It may not have been important to us before then, but we're explained to why it is. And I like to say that all of the works in the museum or the gallery have the same title, which is down at the bottom right there. Please do not touch. One of the things that happens when we go to an art gallery or a museum is that we start to look at the art not for the message that it's communicating, whether it makes us happy or sad or helps us question our beliefs or our perceptions, but we look at it as an object to be bought and sold, something that's worth a great deal of money. And that's because paintings and sculptures that move around can be bought and sold and are actually traded like other objects of speculation. We see this often at auction houses like Sotheby's and so on. Down in the bottom right there you see a list of, at one time, the most expensive paintings in the world. We start with Paul Cézanne there on the top. Go down the list to Jackson Pollock and Pablo Picasso, and then there's Poor Titian at the bottom, coming up only in the $90 million range. So what we need to ask ourselves about this is, just because somebody is willing to pay all this money for this artwork, does that really mean that it's significant to us? The value of it in terms of dollars does not necessarily correspond to its meaning to us as individuals. Now here's a different kind of painting. This one is on the roof of a cave in France, and if I were to ask you folks how much you think this would go for at an auction house like Christie's, I'm not sure what you might say. Other people tell me, $1 million, $1 billion, and so on. But, of course, it's a trick question because we hope, at least, that these paintings, these murals, in fact, are never going to move. They can't be bought and sold. And so when we engage with them, we're not thinking about their dollar value, but we're thinking about what they mean to us, whether or not they're beautiful or interesting or even boring. The other thing about these paintings here is that, in contrast to the ones at a museum, if you want to go see these paintings, you have to go to the cave in France where the artist made them. And you're experiencing not only the artwork, but the space and the place and the climate and the light in which the art was created. Same is true for the Sistine Chapel in Vatican City. And same is true for Diego Rivera, skipping ahead a little bit here. This is a mural that he did or at least started at Rockefeller Center in the 1930s. He got about two-thirds of the way through it. Mr. Rockefeller said he questioned who the portrait was of the man sort of at the center right between the two wings of this design, and it was the Russian leader Lenin, a portrait of Lenin. Rockefeller said he didn't know that Lenin was going to be in there, and then Rivera needed to take him out. Rivera said he wouldn't, but he might balance Lenin's portrait out with one of Abraham Lincoln on the other side. That wasn't good enough for Rockefeller, and he ended up paying Rivera for his work, dismissing him, and then destroying the entire mural in New York City. So if you go to Rockefeller Center, you can't see this, but we can see it in its entirety, completely finished. Another trick question here, and the reason is, for those of you who've been to Bellas Artes in Mexico City, you know, Rivera a couple of years later, excuse me, I got something popping up on my screen here. A couple of years later, he chose to recreate this mural at Bellas Artes in Mexico City, so that's why we get to see it. Here's a quote by one of my heroes, Jose Clemente Orozco, that I think says it best. The highest, most logical, purest, and most powerful type of painting is mural painting. It is also the most disinterested, as it cannot be converted into an object of personal gain, nor can it be concealed for the benefit of a few privileged people. It is for the people. It is for everybody. And here, okay, a few years later after Rivera, we see a program that sort of is inspired by the Mexicans that happens in the United States. It's the murals and sculptures that were done during the New Deal, many in post offices around the country, and I'm sure you folks in Nebraska have quite a few of these. This is a program that was, like I said, inspired by the Mexicans, and the idea was to bring a sense of renewed connection to one's heritage, talk about local economies, and inspire people about their possibilities in small towns across the United States. And folks, in these projects, the artists would come and actually have to have conversations with local people about the content. So we see this first sort of collaboration with public mural projects here in the New Deal era. The question that I'm really asking here is, you know, and it's really relevant to the Mid-America Project and what we're going to do in Nebraska, is that when you consider it, there are very few places in our visual environment where we see our stories, you know, our stories from our lives, our hopes and dreams, our memories, the struggles that we face. What we see mostly are advertisements, and that's because access to that space costs money. Well, in Mexico, again, a little bit later, we see in the large slide here a mural by David Siqueiros. This is on a library in Mexico City. Finding access to that space is difficult, but when it happens, as it is with the Siqueiros mural, things change dramatically. Up until now, we've been looking at murals whose audience had to come inside to see them. They had to choose to go into the building, in other words. When the mural goes on the outside, all of a sudden the audience is exponentially larger, and it's really for any passersby at all. So what will our stories be? That's the question. Well, moving on to like the late 1960s, we see one of the first examples of a community mural that is not supported by government funds or anything like that. These are local people in a South Chicago neighborhood who got together, artists, musicians, writers, and so on, to collaborate and to basically celebrate the heroes and their aspirations in town. They got support from the building owner, and they went as a group and designed and made this mural on their own. It's called the Wall of Respect. Doing collaborative art is not something unfamiliar to us. You know, if you think of a symphony orchestra or a dance troupe like Pilobolus at the bottom right here, we're very familiar with that kind of thing, where artists of different talents work together, usually under the leadership of, in this case, a conductor or a choreographer to carry out their art. The best analogy might be community theater. We have a cast and crew, somebody doing sets and costumes and so on, all working together, usually many of them volunteers. The difference with the mural project, comparing it to community theater, is that we're not only going to perform the play, you know, paint the mural, but we're also going to write it. We are going to get together and figure out what the story is as a group. There's a great mural on the south side of Chicago from the 1990s, artist Olivia Good was working with local folks in the neighborhood right underneath where the L train passed. She ended up going up on the L platform and interviewing people as they got on and off the train. She asked them two questions. The first was, where are you coming from? And the second was, where are you going? And it was really interesting. The answers she got were everything from the most practical, I'm going home to cook dinner, to the much more thoughtful and philosophical, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what the next thing is in my life. She took those responses and painted portraits of the people she interviewed and their responses right next to the portraits. So in this case, with this mural, it's not only for the community, but it's about them, and they had a hand in making it, a true community-based collaboration here. And that's what we aspire to do with the Mid-America Project and in Nebraska. Another mural in Philadelphia that I like quite a bit because it sort of takes us out of this literal realm of facts and figures and historical timelines and shows us something much more metaphorical and poetic and symbolic, where the meaning for each individual might be slightly different, but it can transcend the time that it was painted in. And these are in San Francisco. There's a detail of this mural here on the Women's Center done by a group of women artists known as Prashida Eyes, and this mural actually traces the accomplishments of women around the world throughout time. Quite a big project for them. And you can see in the bottom right there, one of the ways that they described women's contributions was by showing textiles. Another one in San Francisco on an elementary school where kids told the artist that one of the ways they could deal with the alphabet was to use sign language instead of the ABC.